You're listening to episode 165, Lo's Story, Milk Making, Breastfeeding, and Lactation Support in the Hospital Setting. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're here today. We have another podcast host being our guest today, which is always fun because the sound quality is chef's kiss. Well, at least you can decide and let us know. You guys are so forgiving and accommodating and just loving of how this podcast sounds because you know we are pouring our heart into it. Lindsay, our editor and fellow medical mom and unicorn for Child Life on Call, and me, who has just such a deep passion for an honor and humbleness and gratitude for being able to be the host of this show. And then, gosh, you throw Lo in there today, who is a lactation consultant, doula, all of the things. She has her IBCLC certification, which is not easy to get. And then child life specialists know really well how you have to advocate for yourself in the healthcare setting, even as specialists and needing to get in and talk about care plans, and lactation consultants face a really similar path. So, okay, if you're a parent and you hear lactation and you're like, I do not want to listen to this, I did not want to breastfeed, I promise that Lo offers you the most compassionate way to look at the success you have, no matter if you said no from the beginning or you stopped at 3 years, 10 years, she doesn't care. Anyway, she just is incredibly gifted at making us feel like no matter what we did or decision we made it in love for ourselves, for our kids, for our babies. Anyway, I've learned a ton from this conversation with her, and she invited me to be on her podcast. Cool, which is so cool. Okay, good times. Let's get started. Thanks for letting me rant. Okay, see you soon. Bye. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners. All right, Lo, I'm so excited that you're here today. It's been a little bit since we've done one of these expert talks, and I love it because we keep it short and sweet because you and I both know that parents who are going through a new medical diagnosis or a challenge with their child can only digest so much information. So I'm so lucky that you're here with us, and please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Lo Niggorish, and I am an IBCLC, which stands for International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So I help families who are producing milk for their babies or toddlers. And I have a husband and 2 kids and a dog and 2 cats, and I live in rural Massachusetts. And I help families all across Massachusetts and virtually across the country as well.
Wow. How long have you been doing this?
So I had my initial certification as a CLC, certified lactation counselor. I got that about 6 years ago, and then I got my board certification just in the fall.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's
Yeah.
always such a crazy experience when you have kids and this stuff starts coming out of you. And thankfully, with my second kid, I was way smarter. I saw a lactation consultant as often and as much as possible. I mean, just give me all the information. But a lot of our parents who are listening today don't get thrust into motherhood in really the kind of average or typical way that a lot of mothers do. So I'd love to hear about some of your work with maybe moms who have either been in the NICU or have kiddos who are medically complex and how you work with them.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to say first and foremost that I like to treat all families as if they are the experts on their own bodies and of their babies. So even for parents with medically complex kids, for babies in the NICU, or even for people who, their baby is coming back to the hospital for some reason, or they have an older sibling who has a medically complex issue, and they're trying to both care for that sibling, and then they have a nursing baby and trying to both care for both. It can be really, really challenging. And so a lot of people hear lactation consultant, and for some, it pulls up these images of, oh, amazing, supportive person. And for others, it pulls up these images of somebody who shoved their breast in their baby's mouth and didn't ask them a lot of questions and didn't hear what they really wanted for them or for their baby. And so for those families, I want to say, I hear you, that there is a lot of work to be done in our field to make sure that everyone in our field listens better and understands truly what families need and want, and that we do view families as the people who know their children best. And so even for those medically complex kids, even for those babies in the NICU, nobody loves that baby more and wants the best for their baby than the parents.
Ooh, that makes me cry. I don't know why. It's so true. For this already life-changing experience that you go through, to have a clinician come in, and whether it's lactation or the neonatologist or the ultrasound tech, make you feel like your voice doesn't matter, is so upsetting and can cause so much trauma down the road. So
it really can.
I wish we could clone you, Lo, but it sounds like the work that you're doing and the awareness you're making is spreading that message. And so it's so lovely you shared that. Thank you for saying that.
Of course. Yeah. Because when I come in, the first thing I want to do is just listen and hear, like, what have your experiences been? How are you? How's your baby? Mm-hmm. How are you feeling about milk making? So that's just my first thing, is listening. Yeah. I want to know, like, what are your goals? What are you uncertain about? What is your goal for today? Because your goal for today might be different than your goal for tomorrow. Your goal for this morning might be different than your goal for this evening. And I always tell people, no plan that you make is your final plan. So if you're feeling really good about trying to nurse your baby today, but you're not feeling good about trying to nurse your baby tonight or tomorrow, that's okay. We just take every day as it comes, every hour as it comes, and you as the parent are in charge of these goals. Now, I know some people are listening and they were like, that is not my experience in the NICU. And the sad part about many settings NICU settings is, much of what is happening in NICUs across the country is that the policy has not caught up to the science and the research. And so even us as IBCLCs, sometimes we know that sometimes the focus is on just getting calories in the baby and having the baby gain weight. Sometimes to the detriment of the baby and the families. And I'm an IBCLC. I'm not the person who's in charge in the room. Other providers are in charge. And so what I like to do is try to help families to feel heard and feel supported and say, yeah, I know that this is what you're being asked to do. How can I help you feel good about that? How can I help you feel good about that? And how can I help you know that nothing that you have to do today is going to be what's final for when you go home? If this is what you need to do to get your baby home, I want you to know you can create a different plan when you get home. So, we know that often we're dealing with policies that are antiquated in NICUs, like you have to feed your baby on a schedule, or they have to take this much NeoSure in order to be able to go home. That doesn't really align with what current research says about what a 30-weeker needs in the NICU. But if that's the policy of the hospital, sometimes I can help families to say, okay, so that's what your provider is saying that your baby needs. So given that that's what your baby needs to do, how can I help you with your next best option? So would you like to pump some milk? Would you like me to help size the right phalanges for you so that you're super comfortable while you're pumping?
Right.
Would you like me to see if we can get you set up with some skin-to-skin time, which is really good for your milk supply? So working within the limits of the setting and also helping the parents to understand the things that will benefit their milk supply within that setting.
You have said this so well. It is completely aligns with what I have experienced as a child life specialist in the NICU and in the medical setting. And I think what your point for parents, and I want you guys to take this away, is that you have so many people in the background cheering you on and validating for you and trying to be your voice. Because you're right, ultimately we don't make the final decisions, and we can suggest and we can gently guide and we can provide evidence, but we're not the decision makers, but we are doing our best. And then when the decision has to be made, and I see the parallel here for, we only do heel sticks in the isolate. You cannot hold for a heel stick. And that is not my choice. My choice would be that the baby's on skin to skin and that the parents are holding. But if we do have to be in the isolate for this reason, then here's how you can hold and calm your baby and talk to them. And here's how we can make sure they recover. And here's what you can say, so I find a lot of parallels, and you put that so eloquently. And I hope parents hear that, like, we've got your back. Like, we have got your back, and the doctors do too. Goodness gracious, the neonatologists are the smartest people I've ever met in my life. The amount of things that they can keep in their brain. But I hear you on all that.
Yeah. It can be really hard when, the focus is on getting these babies out of the NICU and getting them home. And sometimes, that can interfere with the bigger picture of what is the biological norm for this baby. Well, the biological norm would be for the baby to be transferring milk on their own from the parent's body if the parent wants that to happen. Now, some parents don't care about that. So if that's not what you want to do, I am happy to help you with feeding. I can help you with paste bottle feeding so that your baby can manage the flow of the milk a little bit better. So paste bottle feeding is feeding baby in a little bit more of an upright position with a very slow flow nipple where the bottle is held a little bit more horizontally so that they can bring the milk in themselves. So that kind of mimics a little bit more what happens in the body. so that they're not overwhelmed with the flow of the milk coming in. So I can help with that. And so that they can also start and end the feedings on their own. So sometimes we kind of hold babies in a position laying down to feed them bottles, and then they suck down that whole bottle, and then they don't realize that they were full. Just like when I eat like a
I was just thinking
whole burger and a ton of fries.
I was like,
and then,
those
10
nachos
minutes
I just topped off.
Oh gosh. I just ate too much. And then what happens? That baby spits up, 20 milliliters of the feeding. And then mom starts to worry because baby's spitting up, because baby is spitting up. So, if we can learn some tools like this, even if they're not human milk feeding, it can help baby to kind of learn to feed in a way that is going to benefit them and help them to go home faster.
Your expertise on the skill set sounds like it works really complementary to speech therapists and families, often, all the time, actually, when you're born early, we'll have a consultation with a speech pathologist or a speech therapist. And what I hear you saying, Lo, is that even if they're not breastfeeding, you still have support to offer. And what I want parents to do is start saying yes, because you never know what you're going to learn from someone. And it might be easy to just say, no, we don't need lactation. We're not trying to breastfeed. But no, you can help with pace feeding. You are a wealth of information. You've worked with families who have gone through so much. So I hope more people could be open to saying yes to more support. You never know what you're going to learn from someone like you who gets to come by. So does that kind of sound right about how your role would work?
Yeah, you can say yes. And you know what? Just like with any other provider, if at any point you're not jiving with the person that comes into the room, you can always say, we're good. Thank you.
Oh, yes. And that does not hurt our feelings either, especially when you're in the position that Lo and I are in. Trust me, we want you to speak your mind. And if that means we get the hell out of your bay, we want to go too. And I leave those situations going, hell yeah. Like they said what they needed right then, and my feelings are not hurt.
Exactly.
And then you can come listen to us on our podcast when you are ready for us, because Lo has one too. Yeah. So could you share how people can hear more from you, learn more from you, and a little bit more about your services?
Yes. So I have a podcast called The Milk Making Minutes, which explores baby feeding struggles and triumphs through the lens of systemic and cultural barriers. So anyone who has ever tried to feed human milk to a human baby knows that even though we are mammals, it does not just come naturally for most of us with bluebirds flying around our heads and birds singing.
Oh, God.
It can be a struggle. And that struggle really began within the last 100 years or so. It has not always been a struggle, anthropologically speaking, evolutionarily speaking.
Oh, gosh, you're getting good. Okay, I love this.
Yeah. And that's sad to say, but it's true. And so what I like people to walk away from when they come on my show to share their stories, or when they listen to my show, is that their struggles were not their fault, because so many of us walk away feeling guilty if we did not meet our baby feeding goals, if we ended breastfeeding or chest feeding or pumping early, if we switched to exclusive pumping, if we decided to feed formula. So our struggles are not our fault, and our successes truly are the miracles we feel they are. Like that endorphin feeling of, yes, I did it, is really a miracle given all we have to face to feed babies today.
Oh, man. Gosh, I love your message. I love that. I wish I mean, I had some great support. I was really lucky, but it was still the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, is breastfeeding.
And
I mean, how crazy to say that, right? When you have this idea, and I wonder if it comes from, more than 100 years ago, that I should be good at this. I should be able to do this naturally. I shouldn't have bleeding cracked nipples and have so much anxiety before my baby latches. Like, it doesn't feel normal, So the fact, I love that your struggles with milk making were not your fault, and your successes are the miracles you think they are. Oh, yes. So good.
Yeah. And so one story that I think many of your listeners will like, and you can link it in the show notes, it's with this amazing person, Chelsea B. Her second child had a congenital heart defect, which was diagnosed in utero. So she had this amazing breastfeeding experience with her first. She just loved it. She loved pregnancy. She loved giving birth. She loved breastfeeding. She had no problems latching, no difficulties breastfeeding. And so then she gets diagnosed. Her second child gets diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. They knew once he was born that he was going to have multiple surgeries. She starts breastfeeding him, and then I won't give away her full story, but she ended up ending breastfeeding early. She switched to exclusive pumping, then ended up even ending that early. And she has been carrying that guilt for 5 years until she came on my podcast, really. We're good friends now. And she came on my podcast and we talked about it. And I was able to kind of reframe for her all the support she didn't get in those moments when she was by her son's side while he was in the hospital getting surgeries, when every time she left the room, he would cry when she was trying to go pump. No one thought to try to provide a pumping space for her when he was having surgeries or recovering from surgeries. No one thought to say, hey, can I stand by your son's side while you go pump? There were all these things that I was thinking as she was telling these stories, her story of how she could have been supported to continue to make milk. Yeah. But she wasn't. And she provided milk for him for a long time, for months.
Yeah.
For a very sick child. And her milk benefited him for all of that time. And we know that every teaspoon of human milk has 3 million antibodies, in addition to so many other benefits. So she did this amazing thing for her son, which was not easy to do. And once she was able to reframe that, she was like, whoa, I really did this amazing thing. And I need to stop comparing what I did with my second child with my first, because they were totally different situations.
All right, we'll link it in the show notes, but I love that story.
It's one of my favorite episodes because you can hear her kind of realizing right there in the moment how much, and she's a podcaster too. She has a show called Beyond the Picket Fence, where her whole goal is to help people open up about their stories and not carry guilt and shame. And she realized there in the moment she had been carrying this shame for all this time.
Ooh, wow. That's
about
so
her
powerful.
Own baby feeding story. And actually hearing that story, I've been listening to your podcast for a while, but hearing her story made me think, oh my gosh, I should be talking to child life specialists about how they can help families in these situations.
Oh, girl, please do, because we run to go get the ice so that once the breast milk leaves and we can, you know what I mean? We're getting them that pump so they can stay in the bay, or we're staying with their baby so that they can go. So what episode can our listeners find that on, and what is the name of your podcast?
It's episode 31, and the name of my podcast is The Milk Making Minutes.
Great. Well, how, some of the things that you've mentioned make me see too how child life specialists can work with lactation to support families. And I see a lot of that kind of coming together. Do you?
Yes, absolutely. So I think anytime a child life specialist is working with a family where the parent is producing milk, it might even be a question that just gets asked regularly. If you notice that there's a baby or a toddler, it could just be standard on the forms. Are you producing milk for any of your children? Because that parent might need pumping space in the hospital.
Right.
And nobody has thought of it.
Yeah. I like that. I like that as kind of a part of the assessment. You know, when I was doing some training with NICU nurses, one of the things I actually asked them to stay away from was, you know, the first time the parent comes in or you're working with them, you say, hey, have any milk for us today? And it's really important for the nurse to know, is there any milk today? But the guilt and shame that can fall on those parents who just barely made it in today at all and be like, well, actually, I'm not doing that. So that assessment is so important. So tell me about how your baby is fed, you know, or tell me a little bit about what your plan today is to take care of baby. Maybe you can find out without specifically putting that on there.
Yeah. Right.
And one of the things I've listened to you say is milk making. Mm-hmm. Whether you're pumping or breastfeeding, you're milk making.
Right. Exactly. I try to use inclusive terms because sometimes people, if they're transgender, they don't refer to their bodies as breasts, for instance. And so they might say chest feeding instead of breastfeeding, or if they're pumping, sometimes pumping people do still say that they breastfeed, but you don't know. And so I try to be as inclusive as possible so that everyone feels included in my community.
Well, you are doing that for sure. Everybody go listen to your podcast. And what is your website? How can people find you?
Yeah, people can find me at, it's kind of a strange name, but it's quabbinbirthservices.com. And it's kind of local to my area, but I can see people virtually all over, and I can bill quite a few insurances. So if there is a family who's preparing to go into the hospital and you want some prenatal education about how you can set yourself up for success, I'm happy to do that virtually. Or if you have a sick child and you're spending time in the hospital and you're trying to figure out how to navigate milk making and keep yourself sane, or trying to balance both milk making and formula feeding, there's a way to do both. It does not have to be all or nothing. So if you would still like to provide some amount of milk, but also keep yourself sane by adding in some sort of supplementation, then I would be happy to help you work out a plan for that.
One of the dads on the podcast once, Scott, back in the day, he said that when he met Child Life, it felt like a warm blanket. And like, that's the feeling I get when I talk to you, is like that warm blanket that's like surrounding you. And there's not judgment, and there's just support and love. So thank you for what you do and for coming on and sharing it with our families. And I'm so grateful we had this time together and to get to know you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Child Life On Call podcast. The only reason this podcast keeps on going is because of you and listeners like you. So please join in on the conversation with us on Instagram, Facebook. I'm even on TikTok now, y'all, making a fool of myself. I haven't danced yet, but maybe it's coming. You can find us at Child Life On Call. We also have a website, and that has all of our information about the Child Life Circle, about the Child Life On Call app, and a blog with new information all the time. That's childlifeoncall.com. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart for listening to these episodes and being a part of this community. We are so grateful and so honored to be able to provide this for you.